Hey, what's going on, guys? In today's video, we're going to be checking out a Kotobukiya Armored Core kit. It's been a while. We've taken a look at a few of the Bandai 30 Minutes Missions Armored Core kits in recent history, but we feel like it's been quite a while since we've taken a look at one of the Koto kits. So the Vengeance here was recently reissued, so I took the opportunity to snag one up to build and share with you guys for today's video. It looks like a really cool design. It's got obviously those huge, massive multi-chainsaw weapon there, which does look pretty awesome. So definitely looking forward to checking this one out. But not only that, later in the video, we're also going to be checking out the over the weapons here, which does feature that same weapon as well as another large cannon set. So basically like a two set of massive weapons here that you can use with your Armored Core Kotobukiya model kits. So interestingly, the box for the over the weapon set is almost the same size as the Vengeance itself. So there's going to be a lot of stuff in there. Let's go ahead and get into it for today's video. And so taking a look around the outside of the box here before we get into it, but real quick, that box art is super cool there, obviously with the AC on one side, and then lots of box art dedicated to that massive weapon, which is definitely going to be one of the main selling points for a kit like this. But that looks awesome. Here on the side of the box there, you can see just kind of the close-up view of the front of the design. It looks like that's going to be the same on both sides. And then over here on this side of the box, we can see the breakdown of the parts, the arms, the core, the head, and the legs there. I love the asymmetry of this design as well, which is really cool. And then obviously it's kind of asymmetrical with that weapon. Now, I don't know what that's going to do for the actual balance of the kit. We'll see how it actually performs in use here in a bit, but there you can see how that's going to look all built up. And then aside from the chainsaw weapons, you do have a couple of other weapons in here. So you will have a few additional weapon options there. And then over here on this side, part of the selection recombination process, I guess maybe option there for the head and then option for the core maybe. So you can kind of choose between which one you want to use there. So that's pretty cool. And then over here showing just like a couple of different ways that you can use that chainsaw weapon there, which is pretty awesome. So the MSRP for this one coming in at 9,700 yen. Obviously a pretty big kit like this with a lot of parts, as we've seen in past reviews of Kotobukiya Armored Core kits. Yeah, it's just a lot of parts in there, so expect the price tag to certainly reflect that. Looks like with this one we're going to have a lot of like metallic colored parts too, of a metallic colored plastic for the runners and stuff, which we'll take a look at here in just a moment. Looks like we are going to have a couple of water slide decals here for the crests that you can put on there. Those look really nice. And then for the instructions here, our assembly manual is going to feature, again, very prominently the chainsaw weapon there on the front. On the back side here is going to be our color guide for the unit, basically different shades of red and gray and like gunmetal metallic colors for the most part there. On the inside here, once again, the parts data list, going over some of our different sections of the build there, including the weapons as well, and some more images of the kit over here on this side and kind of how that stuff is all used. And then from there, we've just got our parts list and the instructions for assembly. So that's all going to go through there. But it looks like here on the center fold-out pages, we've got some more information, which is going to be the designer's note, which is really cool here. So a bunch of Japanese text here talking about, again, primarily about the weapon there, but then just some more about the design of this Armored Core unit, which is pretty cool. So definitely, if you're a fan, you know, it's worth translating. I'm sure that's probably interesting to read. Going back through the end of this, once we get through like the weapon equipment and everything, on our very last page here, just going to be talking about the parts selection, how you can choose between the different options there for that, and bonus parts. So after those last couple of photos there, which looks really cool with that head opening gimmick, actually is pretty awesome looking. So with that, let's go ahead and check out the runners. So we'll actually start off with our included base plate here, which does have, that is actually going to be runner Q on there, that we have two of for like little parts that are going to attach onto the base. So we will have this base plate here in black. And then also here in black, we're going to have this PC runner here for a couple of polycaps. Runners A and B then are going to be in this kind of metallic injected brown, which I've got to say, I think that's probably the first time I've ever seen this color molded. A like metallic brown color is certainly very interesting there for some of the armor parts. Runner C here, just in your kind of standard gunmetal metallic color there like that. Runner D we have two of for some more gunmetal parts there. And the same thing here for runner E, but in a little bit darker of a gunmetal color. We got two of those as well. Runner F, once again, back to our just kind of standard gunmetal color here. And runner G we have two of is back to the darker of our two shades of dark gunmetal. And that's going to continue here. Our runners H, I, and J. Runner H there, runner I is a little bit larger of a runner, but just a bunch of mechanical parts on there, as you can see. And then runner J we have two of for some more of those parts in that dark gunmetal color. Runner K, though, however, is bringing you back to the lighter of our two shades of gunmetal here. And then finally a break in the monotony here with runner L, bringing it back to that metallic brown color. So we're not going to have necessarily the most colorful kit here. Runners M and N here being once again in our lighter and darker shades of gunmetal. Runner O we have two of is going to be the clear arm parts for the base for connecting the kit, and then probably one of these is also going to be for attaching onto the chainsaw weapon to hold that up as well. So that's probably why we got two of these connection arms. Runner P, however, gives us a couple of parts here in this kind of molded silver. Runners R and S going to be some more parts here in that dark gunmetal color, so it's going to make it kind of hard to see a lot of the details I feel like on this kit with so many parts being so dark like this. And I was also very interested to see how they were going to handle all the tubing parts that go around to attach onto the chainsaw. I didn't know if that was going to be an actual like soft tube, but it looks like they've opted for just these hard plastic parts, which I always kind of prefer. So that's interesting. We'll see how those work on the kit. Runner T here in molded silver, of course, is going to be our chainsaw blades. We've got 6 of those. Runner U, interestingly, looks to be like just the parts for our additional weaponry, which look very simple in comparison, especially the rifle there. Looks like it's basically just going to be a couple of parts, not necessarily very complex. And lastly, runners V, W, and X are, you guessed it, some more parts here in gunmetal, and looks like a lot of parts mostly for the weapons here in this case. There's runner V, here's runner W there, and we're going to have 2 of runner W, and then last but not least, runner X is going to be a few more parts on there. And that's everything. All right, and so here is the kit all built up, just the main kit, which we'll take a look at here first just to start off. But it really did feel like building 2 kits because then you had to build the chainsaw weapon here, and honestly I think it took more time, if not, I don't know, it took a lot of time just to build this part of the kit as well. So it really kind of felt like 2 kits in one, as the weapon really is a huge part of this kit. But there's a ton of parts in the main body as well. Here it's smaller than I expected, and I'll show you guys a size comparison here in just a little bit. But I was honestly surprised at just kind of how small this was once it all comes together, but there's so many parts packed into there, so it just has a ton of parts, a ton of detail in here, as you can see. Looks really cool. The color scheme is quite dark, so that may not appeal to everyone, but I gotta say, I mean, this thing just looks very impressive. We got a bunch of little option parts and accessories and stuff, so let's go ahead and get into it. And so let's actually start off with the size comparison. Here you can see, compared to one of Bandai's 30 minutes missions armored core kits, which is actually larger than what we've got here for the Vengeance. But if we also compare this to another Kotobukiya armored core model kit here, the Atlas, which is another one that I built and reviewed here on the channel, you'll notice this one's quite a bit larger as well, much larger in comparison. So I don't know if that's just how it is in canon, if just in the game this is just a smaller size mech just with the parts and things that are used on there, or if there's like something different going on with the scaling on these exactly. I'm not sure, because as I understand, these are both 1/72 scale, so they should be like compatible in terms of like the weapons and everything. But on that note, regarding the compatibility of the backpack in particular, which we may talk about more here in just a little bit, you'll notice it's going to be a little bit different because the backpack here for the Vengeance, the plugs plug down into the backpack right there, whereas on the other armored core kits that I've built from Kotobukiya, the backpack accessories all plug in from the side. So don't think that this grind blade backpack that we have here with the Vengeance is going to be very compatible on many other kits from the line. So let's go ahead and take a look at this thing here. We've got our 6 chainsaw blades that are each on a different ball joint there. This whole weapon is going to come disattached, and like this is what's going to actually attach onto the arm. And obviously this is going to be rather heavy and huge, and then there's like different ways that you can pose this. These are also able to be rotated to make a more like hexagonal or a star shaped kind of blade here. But anyway, there's a couple of different ways that you can opt to arrange the blades on this, and we'll try that out here in just a minute when we try out some different poses with this. This part here on the top also is going to open up like that. And yeah, the part that attaches into the backpack is just going to use these 2 pegs right here to plug down onto the backpack there. This is the part that's going to come off and attach onto the side of the arm, because it actually casts off its left arm when using the grind blade here. So the left arm is going to be cast off. This part's going to come around and like just connect onto where the left arm came off from. And then this extendable arm up here on top is going to grab onto the pulse rifle. So the pulse rifle is meant to be held in the right hand, but when our right hand is holding the grind blade, going to use this when you can kind of act out. This is kind of like taking the weapon from the hand, and then it slings it back over the backpack to hold onto the pulse rifle when the grind blade is in use. So really cool parts here for like the tubing and everything on the backpack. These also open up, so just sort of like a exhaust or kind of venting system here for when the weapon is active. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I really like the detail on those parts. These are, unfortunately, each of those tubes is going to be 2 parts put together, so you will have a seam line on all those parts, as you will have a number of seam lines throughout the kit. But this is also the type of kit where it's so detailed that you're probably not going to notice a seam line here or there. But that said, if you did want to actually go through and get rid of all the seam lines where they do exist, it's probably going to be a little bit of work. So we've got our stand included here as well, and these side parts here are optional. You could have it just the main hexagon there, and you've got 2 connection arms. Obviously with a heavy weapon like this, we've got one for the kit and then one for the weapon. You could opt to just use only the one for the weapon if you're just planning on having the kit just standing on the ground. That said, having one attached to the kit might just be a good idea anyway, just to make sure that the kit's not tipping over or anything. If you've got the 2 connection arms, you might as well use them, right? And for our handheld accessories here, we've got the pulse rifle, which, as I said, is going to be connected and on the back when the grind blade is in use, but this is just all in one color here. But again, some really nice detail on it. We'll have some seam lines here on the weapon as well in a couple different areas, but a lot of really nice detail. Really cool weapon if it wasn't completely overshadowed by the grind blade weapon. And even more so, here you also have this rifle here, which is going to be pretty simple, just a few parts. Again, seam line, all in one color, but some really nice detail on that. And again, this should all be very compatible, even though I believe the scale is technically different. If you wanted to use this, for example, with your Bandai model kits, it should be pretty compatible here. I think this should fit in the hand. Seems like it will. Just trying to get the 30-minute missions hand on the handle. It kind of just barely fits. All you would have to do is just very slightly modify it. I would just if you wanted to do that, for example, just file down the handle a little bit so that it fits in the hand. But otherwise, I mean, like, the scale of it does seem like that could work perfectly fine, even though it's not exactly right. As for some of our other accessories, we've got some option parts for the ankle joint and for the hip joint. Basically, you have options between parts that have more articulation or less articulation. So if you want less articulation and just kind of more stability, you can opt for one part or the other on those. Also for up here on the shoulder, which I believe those are supposed to be missile pods, because you have option parts for those to be sticking out. So basically you have to remove this top part here, removing those parts off the top there like that. And then we have option parts here like this to display those doors being open. And so once you have those in place, it's going to look something like that, which is really cool. So you can see it looks like I would think these are either smoke launchers or missile launchers or flares. It's not entirely clear to me, so I apologize for that, guys, but those open up. And you also have this cool camera detail there on the side. That said, like this piece here, you have a similar piece which is meant for the other side, but it's actually meant to go on the Agni kit. The Agni just being a different version of this same kit, but using this piece here connected onto the arm, basically replacing the camera unit that has on this side, with it having like the 2 missile pods there on the shoulders. You can turn it into the Severn, apparently, just by using this little bit there. Also, for connecting onto the shoulders, you have these option parts for the rifle storage. For the pulse rifle, and the rifle can be stored using these parts on the side of the arms. This will just connect onto this side here, for example. They are going to be slightly different, as the connection is slightly different, but that can be plugged onto there like so. And then I guess this rifle fits into here. Again, it's not exactly clear in the manual. I think it's something like that. But anyway, the rifle can just be stored up on the shoulder like that, and you can store the pulse rifle on the other side if you want. With yet another storage option being for here on the side, you can replace this part right here with this part here like that, which again has this connection piece right there, which you can use for storing the weapons when not in use. This one, I guess, is supposed to go on here, something like that, and can be stored in this way here. It looks kind of goofy with it sticking like way back off the side there, but again, I mean, still pretty cool. And then another option part for if you are making the Severn variant, you have this part here, which is basically going to replace this part in between the torso and the arm. You can see there's that black piece and then this like silver piece here, which comes up, which is connected onto this little shield bit there on the front. So you're basically going to omit that and just only use this black piece on here instead if you wanted to make this as a Severn variant, which doesn't have this additional equipment there on the front. Now for our head, there's a couple of different options with this, where we can make it as kind of a different unit as the Gawain, and then there's also an active and inactive version. So when the grind blade is inactive, this is the version of the head that we're going to use. For the Gawain variant, It's got a different part for the top of the head that's a little bit larger, kind of more square piece rather than the piece that you can see there sticking out at the top. And then a little bit bulkier part at the bottom as well, which has a like kind of thicker plate of armor there around the base, like kind of the chin of the head there. So that's going to be the option parts used for that when inactive. And then for when the grind blade is activated, we've got this opened up version of the head. The back part is opened up here like that. The front part is opened up. And again, you have the variation of the front piece here for the Gawain with the more larger square part at the top and then the larger plate of armor at the bottom as well. So the option parts there for the front. And then for making the Arthur variant, we have yet another head here, which does seem to be very similar, but like kind of an even lighter armor variation, as it doesn't have the armor piece on the top. The armor pieces at the front are also smaller here, just kind of a very simple version of what is essentially seems like kind of basically the same head. So you have some really cool options there with that. And with that, just about covering everything, I think let's just talk a little bit more about the main kit itself. Now, as I said, this kit has a ton of parts, which is great in the detail, but the problem is that you might find it to be kind of very fragile. So I'm handling this kit with a lot of care just because I don't want things coming off. I think from my experience building a couple of kits from this series before, usually they're pretty stable. They feel more fragile than they really are, but there are a lot of little parts on here, so I'm just kind of worried about things popping off as I'm trying to handle the kit. Like for example, just this armor piece just kind of came off here as I'm just trying to handle it very gently. So I do want to show you guys some of the gimmicks here of the kit, so I'm just going to have to be patient with it. But what I would recommend for you guys, if it's a small part, especially not a moving part, I would recommend just gluing some of the parts here on this one. So for example, you have this large shield here at the front of the leg. This is just attached right onto the front there with a hard point. So you could omit this if you didn't want to have this on there for some reason, but this does open up here like this. And again, some really nice detail on the inside of there when that's opened up. This part here that popped off the side of the foot is like kind of an extra stabilizer toe here. And it's just attached via this small little ball joint on there, which just doesn't really want to hold the part. And the way that you have to plug it onto there is kind of really tricky, but that folds down for giving us some kind of additional stabilization here, making the foot a bit larger there with that part out to the side. The articulation is all going to be pretty standard. You've got a nice joint there at the elbow, giving you a nice full bend there. The shoulder is going to be pretty limited in terms of like forward, back, up and down movement. Basically, you just have some rotation there. You can bring the arm out to the side, not all that far. The hands are also just connected via just a peg, so you're just going to be able to rotate those. And then obviously we don't have any other hand options included with this, which is kind of disappointing. It really would have been nice to have the inclusion of some like closed fists or like an open hand or something for this arm maybe, but other than that, also have rotation at the midsection. And I mean, just a ton of detail in here around the torso. For example, you have these boosters here that are also connected via small ball joints. There's two at the front and then two at the back on the underside of the torso there. They're triangular in shape. And again, we have really cool details here with like these little sensors all at the front and everything. So again, I'm sorry that my armored core terminology is probably not very correct. I would also recommend being very careful with this antenna, maybe replacing this at some point with like a brass rod, as that's very likely to break if you're not careful with it. But I mean, it feels like pretty resilient obviously, but you're just going to want to be careful with that. So let's go ahead and try out a few poses here with this then. Now, although you do have the rifle and the pulse rifle weapons, obviously I think most people are going to want to display this with the grind blade there. And you do have some nice storage options for where you might want to put the other weapons when not held in the hand, whether you wanted to mount them like onto the shoulder, onto the side of the legs. So you can have that kind of mechanical arm as part of the backpack to hold one of the weapons as well when not in use. So you can still display it with all its weapons, which is great. You have a lot of little option parts for different things, but it's not like a lot of option parts that you have to necessarily pick and choose from necessarily, maybe other than like the head. It's just little bits that you can use for attaching the weapons in different ways essentially, and like the parts for the missile pod on the shoulder. So you can pretty much, for the most part, like display this with kind of everything there all as one thing and not like have a lot of leftover bits. That said, there is a handful of leftover parts in the box. Again, I think that's just from the different variations of this kit that are available, with I believe most of the leftover parts just being from the Agni kit. I believe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, or if there's other variants of this kit that exist. I'm not entirely sure, but overall super cool design. I think obviously the main draw of this kit is just going to be that massive grind blade chainsaw weapon, which is really, really impressive, super cool, very unique. Obviously, I mean, there's kits and like mecha designs and things out there that use like a chainsaw or two chainsaws, especially in the Armored Core series. I guess we recently had the Milktooth model kit out from Bandai that uses a double chainsaw weapon as well, but to have 6 chainsaw blades is pretty extreme, and so it's definitely something that's going to make this kit stand out. It's very unique. Now, I'm a little bit disappointed that the kit is not as large as I expected. The weapon, of course, is quite large, but just the main body is a bit smaller than I expected, so I think it's maybe not going to stand out necessarily for its size, but certainly going to stand out in your collection having a weapon like that. And so speaking of weapons, let's now take a look at the Overed weapons set. But alright, so now that we've seen the kit, let's go ahead and check out the Overed weapons set here. Now, again, this is going to feature the same parts for making the grind blade, but this weapon set also features the huge cannon, and they will let you know there on the box that the armored cores themselves are not included. This is just the weapon set here, of course, in 1/72 scale. But here on the front, the main images of the weapons just kind of featuring them in the inactive state, and then you can see like the active state there with the armored cores in the background. So here on the bottom, you can see some more images of them not in use and in use. There's the grind blade there. And then over here on this side, the huge cannon. They've kind of got them both together here with this armor core, which I forget the name of offhand, but you can see both weapons included as options there for that one. So obviously, with us having just taken a look at the grind blade, we'll just kind of briefly go over that and see if there's really too much different with that, with this version of it. And then we've got the huge cannon, which we're going to be primarily focusing on for this part of the video. Around here on the other side of the box, nothing really to see except for the Armored Core 5 logo, Overed weapons set, and MSRP for this set coming in at 8,500 yen, which I think probably puts it in the running for one of the more expensive weapon sets, to be sure. And again, with this one, certainly not going to be very colorful. I wonder if the runners are separated, like one of the weapons on this side and one on this side. I'm not sure. It doesn't look that way, but just to check out the assembly manual here first to get us started, there you can see once again on the front both weapons, and same thing here on the back, the color guide, which again, it's basically going to be like silver and gunmetal gray, and that's pretty much about it. On the front inside, we got our parts data list, talking about those weapons, just sort of like as it were like in game for an example, but you can see some more sample photos of how those are going to look once equipped. We got our parts list here on the next page, and then the construction, and pretty interesting how the construction manual for this one feels maybe not quite as extensive, but almost as long as the Vengeance kit itself. But there's definitely going to be a lot in here. I mean, as you can see just from the size of the box and the price tag, I mean, just kind of lets you know that there's a lot of stuff in here. So without having really too much else to go over here in the manual, let's go ahead and check out the runners. And so with this set, we are going to get an additional base and an additional base and an additional Q runner there, which is going to give us that additional part there on the base. So we'll have plenty of bases to use for holding our stuff up. And then to go along with that, 3 more of these O runners, which are going to be in clear for the connection arm that will hold up the weapons there on the base. With our first set of runners all being for the huge cannon and the second half being for the chainsaw, here's runner A and runner B. As you can see there, more parts in this gunmetal metallic gray color. That's continued here on to runner C and runner D, which we will have 2 of that D runner there. And then runners E, F, G all being in this darker gunmetal color there. It's almost kind of black looking, but there's runner E, runner F here, and then we've got 2 of the G runner there. Lastly then, for the huge cannon, runners H and I are going to be here in molded silver, runner H being quite large, runner I is smaller, but we've got 2 of those for our silver parts. That's it for the huge cannon. All the parts then for the chainsaw look to be exactly the same. Here we have runners R and S here in that dark gunmetal color, almost black. Runner T is once again going to be our chainsaw blades there in silver. And no runner U, but runners V, W, and X are going to be the rest of our parts here for the chainsaw weapon. Again, all in this gunmetal color here. We've got 2 of runner W and 1 of runner X, and that's everything. All right, and so yeah, having this all built now, obviously the grind blade weapon is the exact same grind blade weapon, and my initial thought of what if we can have 2, I think is not really going to be very possible, just because of the way that this is designed to attach to the backpack and the way that it's designed asymmetrically. I think you might be able to kind of modify it, you might be able to work it out to be able to attach 2 onto the kit, but it would take some modding, and I think it would be, very difficult to pose. You would have to use 3 of those connection arms, 1 for the main kit, and then 1 for each of the grind blade weapons. So, possible, but considering we already went over this with the main kit, and there's nothing different about the version that comes with the weapon set here, we're going to set that aside. We do have our additional stands here, 2 of the hexagonal plates and 1 little add-on bit there. and then 3 of the clear connection arms here for this. And I want to just focus in then here mostly on the huge cannon, and huge it most definitely is. This thing is gigantic, and especially all these little parts in here, it just has a ton of parts. So it's going to connect onto the back here just using these same 2 pegs. So it's going to connect onto the AC in the same way. As you can see up here on the top, this one has 2 of the same type of connection arms here that will fold out for basically holding your handheld weapons when not in use. Those can be stored up there using those 2 connection arms over here on this side. This part, just because it's kind of hard to handle the whole thing all at once, feel like posing with this is going to be quite the challenge. But again, just super detailed with all these bits here. These panels will open out like that. So you've got those 4. It kind of makes it look a bit like a colony from Gundam, but those open out there like that. And then also this cap part here that we can pop off, and we're gonna add this section in here. So not only do those side panels open up, but this is meant to look like it will pop out like that. Actually, I guess we just replace that part here like that. So it's meant to look like that's popped out. These are opened up there like this, sort of the power supply here, I guess, for the cannon. And so just this aspect alone is pretty intense, pretty cool looking. So that's pretty wild. And then of course over here on the other side is going to be the main cannon itself, which as you can see is connected via this arm, which will rotate and then has a couple of different extension points here to be able to get it into place. And there's a couple of ways I guess that this can be fired. So it can be fired just in this position up over the shoulder. So this just rotates up, this is attached onto the back, and this just rotates up over the shoulder and it just fires like that, which is pretty ridiculous looking, huge. And again, yeah, all those little like silver pieces, those are all separate pieces. So you have these little tube pieces, which are actually 2 pieces each. So you've got 2 of those, you got seam lines on each of those, and each one of these like little silver tube pieces here is also a separate piece. It's just crazy. But yeah, this can be fired up over the shoulder like so, if you can imagine it, but then of course can be folded out. Now let's see if I can do this. The instructions, I will admit, not super clear, because it seems like for both of the weapons, we got kind of like a summarized version of the instructions where there was a much like fuller version of the instructions for the grind blade weapon with the main kit, with the Vengeance, whereas I believe probably with the main kit that this comes with, I forget the name, there was probably a more extensive instruction manual for how to use this. But unfortunately with this weapon set, we just get kind of like the simplified version of that. So first of all, we just kind of need to unhook the cannon from the backpack. And so there's this part here that opens up and this part here. And then we should be freed from there. There we go. So you can see these parts, these clasps will all kind of hold onto the cannon. And then once that's separated, it's just kind of its own separate unit here like this. So this part over here on the side is what we're going to replace to actually connect this onto the arm. As even though these are like articulated little fingers here that would seem like, oh, okay, you just like kind of close those around the arm to connected onto there. Actually, you just swap that part off and then switch it for this one, which looks like the hand's all closed up, and then it's connected onto the arm via these 2 teeny tiny little small little pegs there. So not really very effective. You're definitely going to have to use the included base to connect onto that. But this top part of the cannon here will slide. So this, you're going to slide all the way to the front, not completely off, but you're going to want to slide it to the front just enough. There's unfortunately no like stopper for that, but you're going to slide it to the right point, and then it will then slide down and lock into place for kind of the full length version of that. Then here at the front, the bipod will fold down. You have the spikes here for that. I guess it's meant to fold all the way back, so the spikes are going to be quite long. That should actually help it to just like stand up to help our posing, to help like stabilize that. And then also these panels here on the side will also open up here like this. I guess that's meant to be like sort of like a, I'm not sure exactly, but I would assume some sort of like cooling mechanism for the barrel of the cannon there, something like that. So at full length here, when it's going to be attached onto the arm, it looks like it's going to be around 24 centimeters in length. And overall, just got to say, a pretty huge and impressive weapon here for sure. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the kit that this is sort of meant to go with, the Perun. But as I mentioned, there does seem to be limited kits that this type of weapon will work on just because of the connection that it uses. So it doesn't connect to the sides of the backpack, but only connects down from from the top. I'm not sure if there's a different way to modify that. As far as I can tell, there doesn't seem to be. If you wanted to use either of these backpacks with a different armored core that, you know, has the backpack connections on the side, I'm not sure how well that would work. But anyway, I'm just going to do my best to show the weapon off here with the Vengeance. And as you can see, it's pretty impressive. So really awesome weapons, both of these, very cool. I'm definitely going to be using the overhead weapons on some different kits. I'm not exactly sure what yet, but I think those will be really cool weapons to try to use with, like, I'm not sure, maybe like one of the larger 124 scale Votoms kits I think could be kind of cool, or I don't know, some Gundam kit or something. I'm not exactly sure yet. I'll have to think about that, but there's definitely some nice options that you could use these with. It doesn't necessarily have to be with armored core kits, but that's it for the overhead weapons set. Very cool, really huge weapons. Probably one of the biggest weapon sets that I think you can get, you know, not only for, you know, just armored core, but, you know, all mecha kits like this. So if you wanted something huge, this is definitely a great option for you. 2 huge weapons that you can get here in this set. And if there's more kits that these are compatible with, let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, if you guys have any other ideas that you think, you know, other like non-armored core kits that you think that these weapons would go good with, share those ideas in the comment section below as well, for myself and other people to just kind of brainstorm some different ideas of how these weapons might best be used. But that's it for today's video, guys. Hope you enjoyed taking a look at these sets. If you want to check them out for yourself, you can check the link in the video description to USA Gundam Store. We've got lots of great stuff there on the website. And as always, thanks so much for all of your support, leaving a like, making sure that you're subscribed. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Have a good one. Later.